Well, welcome to the show, Sapna. So happy to have you here, and we've made it. We got some technical difficulties out of the way, but we're up and rolling now. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to this.
First of all, can you share a little bit with the listeners about your medical journey and what inspired you to create the Worthy Physician podcast?
Absolutely, I'd be happy to. When I first came out of residency, had a great job, right? And I still love the experience because it taught me what to do and what not to do. And through all circumstances, as long as we learn, we can grow and develop from that. But I hit my first wall of burnout, I would say, toward year 2.5 to 3 out of residency and practice. Why? Was what we call a comprehensivist or traditionalist, doing inpatient, outpatient, and on top of that, almost to a sandwich generation of having ailing parents. So, yeah, having to juggle all of that really put me in a position where I had to choose one or the other. On top of that, unfortunately, my best friend from medical school and residency died by suicide in her office in 2019.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So it's like, what in the world do you do with that? What would drive somebody to that has an amazing profession? It's a beautiful profession. But then I started reading and I learned about the suicide rates of physicians, at least 400 a year. So that's
Wow.
2 medical school classes a year, and that's only here in the United States. The rate of burnout or moral injury is quite high, and we've seen it get higher, through the pandemic. I would say even post-pandemic. It's getting better, but close to 3/4 of physicians had at least one sign or symptom of burnout. And but going back to 2019, 2020, when it started to approach the first year of Dr. Becker's death anniversary, I really didn't know how to process that because it is something that is just so profound and something that we shouldn't have to deal with in medicine. And her suicide, the closest to a suicide note, went into detail as to why she did not want to disclose certain illnesses that she had because she was afraid of professional repercussion. And that just really shook me to my core, to the point of I did put myself in counseling or therapy as well as worked with a life coach. But it's how do you swallow that pill? Like, that's a reality of medicine, that's a reality of physicians, and it's not just a caveat that physicians have. We also hear that in other health professionals, but focusing on physicians, because that's what I do, and that's what Dr. Bicker did. That is why I started the Worthy Physician, because I wanted to know why. How relevant is this? Why aren't we talking about this? When you work with a system as a W-2 employee in a conglomerate, and it's more of the corporate medicine, you're told how many patients you're going to see. You're told how long you're going to have with the visits. Patient satisfaction scores can negatively impact you, and that's not why any of us went to medical school. And you can't fit a peg into a square hole, or you can't fit a square into a round hole. The pieces just don't fit because we know that we have more chronicity of disease, we have more complications because we're living longer with more diseases. And there are a lot of psychosocial factors. You can't squeeze all of that into a 15-minute window. And so, yeah, I would say that operating in that system is a nightmare, but it is reality. So we have to find workarounds, whatever those might be, and that's going to be individual and specialty specific.
Yeah.
Coming back to your question, there's the other side of if I own my own practice, then I really never take my hands off of it, because if I'm not seeing patients, I'm not getting paid. Don't make a business decision or a decision to take on more liability if you're already struggling where you're at currently. So I would say unload some of the things that you don't necessarily need to be doing. Like, well, what's that? For an example, outsource what you can. So lawn mowing, which I prefer to do my own because I like cutting grass. I like being outside.
Yes.
I love it. But meal prep, house cleaning, when you get to the point that you can outsource that, do that, because then that frees up time that maybe you can create some white space and figure out what it is you actually want and need. And once you have a clear mental picture, then I would say absolutely at that point then make a decision. So that way you're going in with your executive function in order, playing out different scenarios, but also knowing the cost, the potential upfront cost, the return on investment, and the liability. These are not decisions to be made like, oh, let's see, this is how I want my coffee, or this is what I want for lunch. They're totally different. The opportunities I've had in the past just kind of fell on my lap. And I was at a good place to say, yeah, let's take that on. Now, this was, of course, before kids. Now that my kids are getting older, I might reapproach that because it aligns with where I'm at in life. So I think that if you want to get into real estate, there are so many things online. There are other physicians that have podcasts. There are that as to how they got into their journey through real estate. There are great audiobooks. I think Rich Dad Poor Dad is still an all-time favorite.
Mm-hmm.
It just gives you the idea of what is a liability versus an asset in just very simple terms.
Mm-hmm.
But also make sure that it aligns with something that you want to do and is true to where you are in life and what you see, like your core values. So it all goes back to being in a clear space, knowing what you want, and then being able to make decisions from there. I think real estate is great. I think houses are beautiful. I think buildings are beautiful. I appreciate the services they provide and the architecture. So I can see myself going back to that as my kids get older, because then they can start doing things that are age appropriate. But previously, all the energy went into the family, and so that's where we decided to liquidate what we invested in.